Good morning,
Morning.
everyone, and welcome to our webinar, How to Stand Out in APAC's Most Competitive Job Markets. I'm your host, Laura, and today we're joined by Charlie Bowsher. I'm going to pass over to him to introduce himself.
Hello, Laura. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie. I'm the MD here at MCG Talent Asia. So we're based in Hong Kong, but we cover the region. And I have been in the region about 4 or 5 months now. And I was in Dubai for 3.5 years before that, and worked in London before that. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
He's a multicultural man.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to run through a bit of housekeeping before we start. So if you do have to dash off at any point, a recording will be available afterwards for all registrants. But if you do stay with us on the live, you'll be able to ask us questions in real time using the chat function. To do that, if you wiggle your mouse over the bottom of your screen, click it and pop any questions in there at any point during the webinar. The questions will be anonymous, so it's only myself and Charlie that will see those questions come through. So please don't be shy. We're going to answer as many as we can. And to get us used to using that chat function, I'm going to start by asking you guys a question. What's the biggest challenge you faced when trying to stand out to employers in APAC? Now, whilst you're getting your answers into the chat box, I'm just going to cover the agenda and talk through what we're going to be talking through today. So first, we'll look at understanding the APAC hiring landscape as a whole. Next, we'll move into why great candidates often get overlooked. Next, we're going to move into strategic visibility and getting on the radar of top employers. And then after that, we'll look at the positioning gap and how to articulate your value. Now, after we've gone through all of those sections, we'll come to an audience Q&A. And if there is time in the middle somewhere, we'll also answer some of your questions. So just before we move on, let's have a look at some of your answers. So a lot of people have said struggling to get in front of someone after that first round, or often struggling to get to the interview point, not getting responses and not understanding why they've not been considered for the position. And a lot of those answers coming through are very similar. So these are things that we're going to cover in the webinar. So let's crack on and get started. So first, we'll look at understanding the APAC hiring landscape. So it is one of the most diverse and fast-changing hiring markets in the world. I think you can agree, Charlie, having been in the UAE and also there now. So
Yeah.
yeah, if you are hunting or planning a career move, it helps to know what employers are really focusing on now. So what are the
Yes.
biggest hiring trends you're seeing in Singapore and Hong Kong and the APAC region in general right now?
Yeah, I think look, to answer this one, just because I could go on all day, because we cover, just to introduce everyone as well, our sort of core areas of focus are across marketing, comms, digital, tech. So sort of like very different sectors. So I'm gonna have to speak quite broadly. I think across Hong Kong and Singapore, something we've noticed over the past year is definitely a resurgence in the tech side, which is great to see. I think also both regions are trying to position themselves, Hong Kong, Singapore, as sort of these crypto hubs as well, which is like really interesting. We've seen a lot of the big players, the sort of really well-known like brokerages, they're sort of headquartered here. So that's really driving talent. They're looking to tap into the Chinese market as well there. So that's an interesting one to watch. Bit wider, and again, like broadly speaking, I think, and this goes for like the Middle East as well. We're definitely seeing a pivot towards smaller, lean agencies, and that's across sectors. I think the big boys, like, we've seen a lot of mergers take place in the advertising world, the sort of comms world against, the big names. And I just think they're struggling to compete against the smaller, more agile firms that are sort of like hoovering up a lot of business without the huge overheads that they might carry. And I think a continuation of trends that we've seen in the past year, which are, and this as well sort of reflects across to MENA, where you're based, Aura, where there's a huge focus on talent within. So when I first moved to Dubai, I think 2021, it was like if you had someone from the UK or Europe looking to relocate, I mean, those guys, like, clients would wait sort of 6 months, like for them to sort of get there, and offer these huge fancy packages. It's just not the case now. Like regional experience is so important. And within that, local language skills as well, which makes things a lot trickier. Definitely in Hong Kong, real emphasis on things like Cantonese, Mandarin, which is it a skill that could be picked up overnight, or even in a year versus sort of more local talent. So that's quite a sweeping overview of what we're seeing here. And yeah, more regionally, I suppose, because we also like, I know our offices are Hong Kong, Singapore. I think some good news coming out of the region is, I think from a recruitment perspective, I think two of the most interesting countries where even the bigger recruitment players are sort of recorded sort of like record numbers have been like Japan and Korea, which are really establishing themselves emerging growth markets in the recruitment space, which is completely bucking the trend of everywhere else in the world. So, yeah, interesting stuff.
That is interesting. And, I didn't realize about those kind of upcoming countries as well, although I do
Yeah.
absolutely love Japan, so I can't say that I'm that surprised. Okay, let's move into what skills are employers looking for right now? What are they placing the most emphasis on?
Yeah. Again, I don't want to dwell on hard skills because I think that would be like, we could run through each sector, each level, each role. But I think the one we're seeing like massively come up, and it makes our job very difficult because it's not something you can measure off a CV. It's soft skills. And this goes back to the Middle East. I know I've seen we've got like, a few people from the chat box asking questions from there. Covers APAC. Like it's a really saturated market. It's a client-driven market. They've got the luxury of choice, and they need to be very selective in who they hire. And it's sort of in a time where I wouldn't say, no, to speak frankly, we are in a bit of an economic downturn. There's a lot of uncertainty. They can't afford to make mistakes with hires. So they want someone that they know is going to come in and be a great addition to the team. It's going to not be tricky to work with. And they just can't afford to take risks on people that, maybe you might be able to take a bit of a chance on a hot shot in like a buoyant market, but less so when sort of things are like they are now. So soft skills and communicating those during interviews, and actually I know we're coming on to it, can be communicated through your LinkedIn presence as well. I think that's a huge differentiator and one that our clients are really picking up on at the moment.
For sure. I mean, soft skills are just like, I don't want to say the buzzword, but everybody's talking about those soft skills right now and
Yeah.
being able to lead and have empathy and emotional intelligence. So that's super interesting. And I know you mentioned you touched upon just regional shifts. Let's look at regional
Yes.
economic shifts, and how they're
Yes.
impacting recruitment strategies.
Yes. Such an interesting one. We probably do a webinar on that itself. Hong Kong, Singapore for APAC. We just live in such an interesting time. And I've been to China twice in the past month, to two tier one cities, so Shanghai and Guangzhou. And every time I went, it was sort of in the middle of that big trade war where, Donald Trump, I can't speak Mandarin, but I'm assuming they probably didn't have the nicest things to say about him, but his face was sort of everywhere in the midst of that. And interestingly, I actually had a weird way to start a story, but it was in a sauna in a gym, but a chat with a guy when I was in Shanghai, and he worked there, and he was saying that bit like everyone else, it sort of caught China really by surprise, the tariffs. But they were sort of caught between a rock and a hard place where they wanted to look strong in how they responded, but equally, I think more for like your Shanghai, Beijing's like there's a ton of American companies there. Like all the big banks are there, like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. So they've sort of got to tread this fine line in how they go back, where if you can't go back too hard, and then America pulls out, like all the American companies pull out, and a lot of Chinese people have lost their jobs. So it's a really interesting one. It's still sort of playing out in the background. And the reason I sort of focus that answer around China is because it's such a big driving force for the region, right? Like, I think someone told me, I think 40% of all of China's offshore money is in Hong Kong or invested into Hong Kong, which is, in the grand scheme of things, a tiny place. And I know it pitches itself as a sort of international hub, but so intrinsically linked to China. And when the sort of chips are down economically, I think there's a great talk. It's quite a famous one. Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, did. I think like back in 2015 in America. I think he's on stage with Bill Clinton, and he says it's the American attitude when things are down: spend, spend, spend. But China's like attitude is like real fiscal conservatism because they've like experienced, especially the older generation, like such hard times. So their sort of inclination is to keep that money, save it for a rainy day, and you're sort of seeing that luxury sales are down. So it's an interesting one. We're sort of very tied to the global economy. Singapore also, I think, it was Dubai before Dubai, maybe a little bit. So that is playing a part and competing with the UAE now for talent. It's a lot harder to get into Singapore and get a visa there. And we actually know of some of our clients are like big, players told us sort of off the record that the UAE has sort of headhunted them and said, you know, sort of made overtures that they'd be getting golden visas if they were to sort of move their shift their operations to the UAE. So there's also like the emergence of the UAE, Saudi Arabia as sort of investment hotspots where that money previously might have gone into Singapore and Hong Kong. So, and on top of that, you've got the inflation, everything else that's sort of impacting the market. So, bit of a long-winded answer, but I hope that ticks off some of the points there.
Oh, for sure. I love it. I feel like you said, we could do a whole webinar around just
Yeah.
that one question because there's so much to say. And I love the fact that you were talking politics in a sauna with another guy. That's brilliant.
Yeah, like I'm just gonna say he started the conversation, but yeah, maybe clip that out so I don't look a bit weird. But
Okay, let's move on to roles and which roles are in
yeah,
demand. So, what roles are you seeing that have the most demand right now? And what are the top candidates doing to secure those roles?
yeah. I'm gonna have to speak. So I'm like sort of more tech digital.
Hmm.
So I think what's great in that area, and oh, by the way, like PR comms, Laura, you guys in marketing did an amazing report for APAC, which went out last week. So if anyone's interested in that space, check it out. It's far more intelligent and insightful than I can ever be in that area. But like tech, we're seeing product make a bit of a resurgence, which is great because it sort of did really well 2021 and sort of petered down. Um, I think like quite an interesting area. Obviously, AI, that's like, less of a buzzword, more of a reality now. I think you've seen OpenAI headquartered in Singapore. I just saw a great LinkedIn post this morning about one of the fastest rising job titles in America, which, we tend to follow the rest of the world, what America does. In California, it's like Silicon Valley is like content engineer, which I think ties into this rise, and that's obviously like very linked to AI. I think the sort of area where we're being called in the most is less at that sort of junior mid-level now because unfortunate reality, a lot of people have been laid off. So you don't really need a recruitment company to sort of help you out there. But definitely where we're finding, and we sort of touch on this, I think, in a question, in a couple of questions' time, is niche sort of skill sets within either tech or digital, but then also combined with that cultural alignment that is so important when you're working in Asia or even actually like going back to the Middle East, like, if you were to place someone, I mean, the difference between Dubai and Riyadh, they're a 2 hour flight away, is like, it's like different planets, really. So it's sort of matching those skill sets as well as the soft skills. And I think that's where we're seeing more of a demand for positions and our help actually coming in to fill those.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it's that kind of straddle between those two kind of core aspects. Um,
Yeah.
Interesting. So the next question is a bit broad, but how
Yeah.
do hiring expectations differ between multinational companies and local firms?
Yeah, I think for this one, I'm going to have to generalize quite a bit because we've got like
Very
quite
broad.
a few, quite a mix. But to generalize, and this goes across all the markets, like it's not always the case, but I say multinationals are usually a bit more open to international talent. There's probably a bit less of a pressure there on the language skills, depending on the role, because it's a more international environment. You're likely plugged into a wider global ecosystem. But I think people should remember. I think this probably goes more for again, to speak broadly, like Abu Dhabi, Riyadh, Hong Kong, maybe some places in mainland China, like some of the tier one cities there, like the culture is so vastly different. Like the role might be a perfect alignment, but that experience of working, the hierarchy, like, in a 200-year-old Chinese mainland company versus a sort of lean, slick startup that's opening. I mean, it's just like completely different worlds. So to speak very honestly, actually, I think one of to use like a case study, an example we had where if I look this year at something we did that didn't really work out, which I don't think was anyone's fault because we sort of delivered on the brief, was where a very local company briefed us with getting a candidate who had that, international experience, sort of would think very differently than they did and would potentially spearhead change. Um, but when they actually came together, it just didn't gel at all. That was a real eye opener for me. So looking back at that placement in particular, I'm just like, it's not that there's not a want for change, but when it's so entrenched, like it can be in some of these local companies, it's very, very, very hard to get, even if one or two stakeholders are on board, you're talking about an entire company culture. Like, and in Asia as well, it tends to be, I think for Hong Kong, China, if you look at places like Tokyo as well, like, the longevity of like time people spend in places, I think like Japan's quite famous, right? People spend 20, 30 years at one company. It's a real taboo to sort of like move around. So going in there as an outsider, unfamiliar with that culture and trying to enact change there, I mean, that's just like so, so tricky. So that is like one thing to bear in mind when you're, I think, approaching companies.
Okay, it's very different then from the UAE in the way that they have to really mesh together and that longevity
Yeah.
in roles.
Yeah. But I mean, look at the UAE, right? Look, what's the expat ratio? I think, 90+% expats, right? So there's not, I think you have local companies, but they're predominantly expats. So you don't have that entrenched. And the UAE is only what, 53 years old as a country. If you compare that to some of these like huge Japanese or Chinese holding groups that have been around for 200 plus years, I mean, it's just worlds apart. So that's an interesting way that Asia's different.
Yeah, I've never thought about it being so different, but to hear you explain it like that makes it feel like we're just in two complete different planets, to be honest.
Yeah.
So different. Okay, let's move into our second section, why great candidates get overlooked. And I know that a lot of people in the audience are itching to kind of find the answer to that question, and to the questions within this section, because we've had quite a few about why they are
Yeah.
getting overlooked. Now it is for
And I'll
sure
just say I can speak quite broadly here. So it's like not this one won't be necessarily
specific.
APAC. It could be like, quite generic. So I'm hoping it's as relevant to as many people as possible.
Well, I'm sure everybody will be able to take something from what you share with us today. So let's keep it broad.
Okay.
And then when we come
Yeah.
to our Q&A, we might be able to help a little bit more on specifics. So what are the most
Yeah.
common reasons great candidates don't make it past screening?
Yeah. And this is where I'm going to be like very against, I suppose, a little bit against the grain. Um, I don't think it's people don't make it past screening. I think it's that they don't get seen. And like, I think you need to understand what the recruitment's like back end looks like. And I'm sure if you were to poll the people we have on this webinar, 95% of people, and like we know this through speaking to the market, their primary method of applying for jobs is LinkedIn Easy Apply. And LinkedIn's a great platform in so many ways, and it's a rubbish platform in so many ways as well. And the way they've sort of commodified Easy Apply is like it's one of the biggest travesties that's happened to like the job market today and why so many people experience frustration. Because it's not that you're not passing screening, it's that anyone can apply to 50 jobs in the space of a minute. When you've got 5,000 applicants and only one person can get the job, hiring managers don't have the time to sift through individually. Um, I would say the answer to this question is me not answering this question and actually saying, get off LinkedIn as much as you can if that is your primary method. Go direct, like, go, we call it old school, but I mean, if I post a job, my email's in my bio, by the way, on LinkedIn. And when I post a job on LinkedIn, I get, and I'm not exactly 100, 400 messages. I've had to mute it because it's just like permanently ticking up. And I get like two emails. And every time I get an email, I read it. Like the open rate on an email is probably, unless one or two I miss or go to spam, 80 to 90%. my open rate on messages on LinkedIn is like 0.01%. It's a full-time job for someone to sit there and go through it. So if you're struggling to get seen, you're struggling to get heard, like I cannot stress how much like you need to take it away from LinkedIn. And all of these companies have careers pages on their websites, which are going to be, probably a bit more time consuming, but a lot higher like quality in terms of how it's valued. Um, and that's the way to go to sort of break through and just, LinkedIn, like you're leaving your destiny in someone else's hands, which I would hate the idea of. And
Mm.
as dramatic as that sounds, like it needs to be proactive, like, and it needs to be you doing as much as you can. And the way to do that is to pursue higher quality, go where the crowd isn't, and that's off platform. Like get emails, download Lucia. It's a tool that lets you scrape emails. Obviously, don't spam people, but you know, like I said, I read most of the emails I get. Um, I don't know. I just don't have the time to read most of the LinkedIn messages I get.
Okay. Now, we've had a few questions come in the chat about this kind of topic, and I just want to touch upon
Yeah.
on one of those just to elaborate a little bit on what you mean by go old school. So how can people really stand out and kind of move away from LinkedIn? Like you mentioned, they could
Yeah.
send a personalized email. Do you have any other
Yeah.
suggestions of what people could do to really stand out from the crowd?
Yeah. I think like it's unfortunate, it's time consuming, it's draining, but especially in the Middle East, finding a new role is like it's almost like a part-time job on the side. Like I seriously empathize with anyone. So like just, some case studies of candidates I know that I've sort of worked with that have found roles organically themselves. And these are completely genuine, 100% true. One is a lady who actually I had a contract offer for her, but like for like 2 months' work. But she got a full-time job herself in HR because she started a weekly HR coffee meetup. She was unfortunately laid off. Like got like, it grew, got like 20, 30 people a week. And one week someone turned up who had two job offers that she sort of become quite friendly with. Um, Obviously he took one, referred her to the other, and she got that. Another way is a guy I know, and this is actually, to be honest, this is sort of UK based, but he was struggling to get through. He was in the tech space, and he like what's the word? He posted his like portfolio, so a CV and like his portfolio of his achievements, his skills, everything like that, to 10 people he knew was hiring. And it goes back to this open rate thing again, right? Like LinkedIn, 0.01%, probably lower. That's like the odds of your application being seen. What's the open rate of, how often do you receive post? In the UAE, I think it's pretty like digital everything, right? So, I mean, that's just such a like unique way to stand out. And is it going to have a 100% success rate? No, but how many people are doing that? And like emailing people, the primary method, everyone tries to do that entire search um, through LinkedIn. Um, it's just like if you could see the inboxes of most of our team, and like, I'm sure that extends to talent managers, hiring managers, whoever, like, again, such a crowded space. If you can send an email, the open rate on that is just so much higher. And most of the time you can find it online anyway. Or if you find one person's email at the company, like, first name dot surname, then you know how to sort of go and like, get in front of everyone else.
Yeah. Okay, that's super interesting. And I think the key takeaway there is just do something to stand out. And, it might not always land, but if you can
It's
make
just
yourself,
exploring every avenue, right? And there's
yeah,
no right answer. Like I can't sit here and say if you do this, it will work, but activity breeds luck. And the more you're doing and the better, higher quality versions of it you're doing, then and like if there's other people out there that are doing that, then they're the ones that are sort of going to stand out and they're the ones that are sort of getting in front of people. So but equally, look, I empathize with anyone that is in the job market at the moment because it is seriously tough. And actually, we've got a newsletter. Last year, we did like a ton of articles. Laura, I think if you the inner circle, and it's got like, we sort of cover it in lots of sort of articles that are like, you know, here's like 5 ways to do this and 5 ways to do that. So I think that might be quite helpful, judging by some of the questions that are coming in.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm going to link the inner circle so you can subscribe to that newsletter in the chat whilst Charlie's answering this next question for you guys. So, how important are CV design and formatting in markets like Singapore and Hong Kong?
Yeah, yeah, I mean they are, and this it's what's interesting working internationally is, and I think it leads into a sort of question we have coming up that there's no one right way to do a CV, right? And it differs then between like internet, like some of the questions I get, like should I have a photo on my CV? Well, one company might say yes, well we'd like that, and other companies I say why are you putting it on there? Like I think what's this is what makes LinkedIn the good side of LinkedIn is LinkedIn sort of homogenizes everything and gives you like that one, it gives everyone the same canvas, right? Like you can put your experience on there, but you can't edit it and sort of merge it around like you can with a CV. So, I mean, CVs, design and formatting, don't get too caught up on it. Just make sure you've done the basics right. I put hyperlink to your LinkedIn on there. I think that's super important as well because your CV sells to who you put it in front of. And if you apply for a job at, um, I don't know, X bank, and then on LinkedIn you see someone from X bank, the head of talent's viewed your profile through the hyperlink you had on your CV, well, then you can follow up with them directly and start a conversation. So the CV is still important. I wouldn't get too caught up on design and formatting. Just make sure it's does the basics right. But sort of use it as a tool to push things to your LinkedIn where you can then try and control the conversation or at least see what sort of traction you're getting through that viewed your profile feature.
Okay, helpful. That is super helpful. And it's a great tip there. Someone views your profile and you can see who it is, message them. And just chase. I think a lot of people sort of drop off after they kind of apply and then they apply for another role. Like I see a lot of posts about, I've
Yeah.
applied for like 700 roles and it's, have you applied and
Mm.
chased or have you quick applied? So I think there's that. It's great that you've kind of differentiated that for everyone and
Yeah.
given them tips to stand out there. Now, this is a question we had at the very start of the webinar, and
Yeah.
think this you can answer in your sleep because you are a bit of a LinkedIn guru. So,
Pressure on.
what are some effective ways to optimize a LinkedIn profile?
Um, I mean, we've done a ton on this, so I'm going to defer to that newsletter that you posted. There's like, if you scroll down to last year, there's like loads of stuff on there. But I mean, so many ways, so many ways. I mean, just if we're going to speak broadly, make sure you've done the basics right. Like LinkedIn is such a powerful differentiator in a crowded market, and like what I find frustrating sometimes is when I don't know if frustrating is the right word, but what I find confusing maybe is, people's like hesitation towards LinkedIn. Like if you're trying to find a job and you're not willing to sort of post on LinkedIn or like, do it up or it's like a more formal Facebook. I mean, I feel like that's the way people like use it nowadays. Like, and it sells you passively 24/7. Like if you can get everything on there done right, so like a clear like profile picture professionally done, an about section that's clear about who you are, what you do, your experience, and everything on there. That works to sell you in your sleep. So it's so important. We've written a ton about it last year. I'm going to stop there because otherwise I'll be going on for hours and hours and hours. But just nail the basics and let LinkedIn do the work for you. And the easiest way in the world, actually, one more thing I will say is every week on LinkedIn, you get 100 connections, and you can use those connections to connect with anyone. I've connected with some of the most random sort of people. Sometimes I just try and see like who'll accept, and um, but like it puts you in front of them, it puts you on their radar, and if you do that consistently with people in your industry, and I'm not going to say, look, they're not all going to accept, or they might not all be. And like, I know in Asia, people use it a bit less than they do in Dubai. But I mean, if you do that consistently for one quarter, say that's 1,200 connection requests sent out, excluding the ones you're going to get inbound, um, acceptance rate, which I think is low. Well, that's 600 people you've now got in your network, in your industry that you can leverage. And, who knows, one of them might post my boss is looking for someone. That's something you would have missed if you weren't connected to them, or someone might reach out to you based on your content that you're connected with that they've seen, thinking, oh, like, I've noticed you're out of work. We have a vacancy coming up. So super important. Don't neglect it. The candidates I know that have had the most success on their own are the ones that go all in on LinkedIn.
Interesting. And would you say that LinkedIn is more important than a CV now then?
Tricky. I think over time it probably will be. And one thing that I hear so often, like I think like just to again give you a glimpse of the back end, right? Like where we're working in, we work with very busy people, right? That usually we're called in when there's a gap in the team they need filling urgently. And they're very busy. They've got their own schedules. And let's be honest, like recruitment is a pain in the ass. You've got to sit through like 5 or 6 hour-long interviews. They want like the most smooth, hassle-free process. And that's sort of our role to step in and make that search as easy as possible. And what we're seeing, we've got a lot of these clients. It's not like super formal, right? Like I've got most of my clients on Instagram. I don't talk to them about work on there, but if I had a vacancy come up, they'd WhatsApp me, like say I'm looking for X, and I'll be like, oh, have you seen Y? And they say, no, I haven't. And they say, can you send me their LinkedIn? Um, and I think, everyone's seen that stat. I don't know if it's true or not, where it's like, the average person spends 6 to 8 seconds looking at a CV. I think that's rubbish. I think it's way less. I like sounds like, it makes me sound like not doing my job properly, but I can genuinely tell sometimes when 2 to 3 seconds of opening a CV whether someone's right or wrong for this particular position. So LinkedIn's great. Like it's CV will always be there and it will be there for the foreseeable, but LinkedIn is something that, again, to go back to the other reasons, it's there 24/7. Your CV only sells to who you give it to. Your LinkedIn, anyone can see it. People can stumble upon it. You can see who's viewed it as well. So you can sort of follow up with those people. We mentioned that already. If you're posting content, the reach is unlimited. I mean, I think I was speaking to Justin yesterday and he said one of his posts, it was a video clip, but it got like 600,000 impressions and 4 bits of inbound business from people that didn't even like the content. So like the reach is crazy. And it's just the way like CV's great, that's the base, but LinkedIn's the way you amplify things and really take it to that next level and yeah, sort of bring that control back within yourself.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn's great as well that you can see someone's career history and then some of
Yeah.
their personality as well. So I do
It's
really
an
like.
interactive CV. And it's so much more like a CV, you can't really put personality across. I mean, the only place you can do it is hobbies, but I think everyone's got the same thing under hobbies. It's like gym, sports, or baking, whatever. But like LinkedIn, if you're posting on there, um, hypothetical, like, right? If I had 2 candidates for a role, both very similar, and I went on one's LinkedIn and I'm seeing like, a passion for industry, like really like insightful sort of LinkedIn content. And then I've got someone else who, same CV, but a blank LinkedIn who hasn't posted and it's not optimized. I think just subconsciously you veer towards that person that's sort of like a bit more active. Um, so again, huge differentiator. Has it replaced the CV? Not yet. Will it over time? I mean, maybe, probably, but I think right now they sort of complement each other. So yeah, I wouldn't like drop one for the other.
Right, got you. So both have to be good. Now
Yes.
I'm going to go back to this portfolio kind of situation you mentioned earlier that someone
Yeah.
created a portfolio and that really helped them to stand
Yeah.
out. So are portfolios still relevant outside of creative industries? And if so, what do you think they should include?
Are they the norm? Probably not. But again, if we're talking in a market, and I can see a lot of the questions coming in about people struggling to stand out, I mean, they're a great differentiator to have, and I think they'd be viewed positively over someone who doesn't have one. And I mentioned the story there of the guy that I knew that got a job by like literally going to a post office and posting his portfolio and CV directed to someone at their place of work, and that got him a job. And I'm not saying that's going to work for everyone, but you mentioned yesterday, Laura, about there's a company in the UAE that like creative portfolios and they're taking videos of them and sharing them. So it's a great way to stand out. And I don't think anyone's going to look at that and think, oh, they've got a portfolio, like, that's bad. It can only work in your favor, really. It just goes showing you've gone that extra mile.
It's almost like showing and not telling someone what you can do. It's like, here's my work.
Yeah, it probably as well, like if you think about it from a hiring manager's perspective, probably eliminates parts of a screening call as well and sort of like streamlines things based off your own prerogative. Um, because they don't have to ask you half the questions they would have done during a first round interview.
Yes, exactly. They can already see it. So I think that's a great tip. Now we are just gonna come to a really quick Q&A, like one or two questions before we move into the next section because we've had lots of questions come through. And a lot of questions about people that want to move abroad, move to Hong Kong, move to APAC. So
Yeah.
do you think your level, so entry versus mid versus senior, impacts your ability to get a job in, say, Hong Kong or Singapore?
Yeah, for sure. I think probably the one space relocations and it can open this up as well to the UAE probably because it's pretty consistent. And look, companies at the moment are not going to pay X amount of money, just like from the perspective of a company, and like end of the day, it's business, right? If they want to relocate someone from anywhere, they've got to pay flights, visa, insurance. If they're coming with a family, usually you get accommodation. The market is so saturated, and like I mentioned, there's so many people that have unfortunately been laid off. There's no real need for them to sort of incur those costs at a junior to usually mid-level by relocating someone when there's so much talent available on the ground already, some of which are immediately available, hold right to works in places like, Singapore and Saudi Arabia are incredibly tough places to get a visa, incredibly expensive as well. So if someone's got a valid right to work, I mean, that's worth its weight in gold. So the need to relocate we've definitely seen it like drop considerably. And I mentioned that in the beginning when I first moved to the UAE. If you had someone from a tier one market looking to relocate, they'd be fighting over offers. It's just not, even like great candidates now, it's sort of like companies just aren't willing to take that risk. Because as well, there's also the time risk, right? Like interview process, I think 4 to 6 weeks is the usual interview process. Then you've got a 2 month notice period. Then you've got 2 weeks for them to make the move versus someone who is on the ground already. And there's a lot of people, unfortunately, at the moment that are out of work, and then who have regional experience. So wouldn't need that time to upskill in the relevant market. So is it impossible? No. Do I see it happen? Yes. Do I see it happen as often as a few years ago? No. But I've seen people make it happen. I just do think the reality is companies are a bit less receptive to it when you factor in all of those things, the processes, the costs that go into relocating someone internationally.
Yeah, I mean, even for me here in the UAE, like the change I've seen in 2 years of the
Yeah,
years of me being here and how everybody now wants regional experience, it's just moved so fast, so
I
quickly. So,
think what like a sort of hidden thing, I think to speak on your point there about Dubai and how, I think everyone in the world is sort of looking to get into Dubai at the moment. But I think what people don't see, I think you see the great Instagram stories there. But I think from my time there, like the average, if you factor in, I knew a lot of people that came and actually really didn't get along or really it wasn't what they thought it was. Um, and like probably the average sort of person lasted 6 months to a year. I think you forget about a lot of people that come last a month, 2 months, whatever. So companies are factoring that as well. Like there is a high turnover of people that come. Living abroad isn't for them because it is a burden for people that haven't. Once that honeymoon period wears off, like naturally you're in a new country, a completely new culture. Um, so companies are sort of factoring that as well.
and also the work ethic here, like everybody to make it in Dubai
Yeah.
or like Hong Kong, place like that, you have to work really, really hard. And a lot of people kind
Yeah.
of come here with this vision of Dubai of being like glitz and glam.
Yeah.
boat
I
parties,
think now,
beaches.
definitely, and I think that's a great point because any of those places, unless you're a local there or have a a valid residency, your right to live there is completely linked to your employment status. And if a company's there paying you all this money, like visa, insurance, and you're not generating a return for them, I mean, they're not going to keep you on out of charity, right? When they've got millions of people knocking on their door saying, "I'd love to take that spot." So, no, I don't want to be negative, but that's the sort of like reality I think that people don't see, and that is like the current state of the market
Yeah, you have to work hard to succeed.
for
Okay,
sure.
let's move into our next section because I know I'm looking at the clock and I want to make sure we get through all of these questions. So
Yeah,
our next section is about strategic visibility. Now, you don't need to go viral to get noticed, but you do
yeah,
need to be visible in the right places, right? So how can
yeah.
candidates build visibility on LinkedIn without constantly posting content?
Um, I've mentioned it, but I'm going to answer this question in two parts because actually I didn't like that question, Laura.
That's okay.
I'll tell you why. Because look, if you want to stand out on LinkedIn without posting, connect with 100 people each week. They click accept and they've forgotten about you the next day, or strategically comment. And LinkedIn is actually the algorithm really pushes comments now. It measures your impressions and you can see your impressions on comments, which it didn't do before. Yeah, so like I think if it's over 8 words, like you can sort of track like your metrics and how well it's done. So it's a good way to sort of if you've got someone with a huge following there and you post on their stuff. Um, there's some really annoying people that have set up like an AI tool, by the way, that auto comments on my stuff. It drives me crazy because the second you post, they've commented. But that question, I mean, it's like asking, how do I get fit without going to the gym? Like it's a saturated market. It's a competitive market. Posting on LinkedIn, and it doesn't have to be cringe either. Like, um, you post on Instagram. I can guarantee 99% of people in this chat, fair play if you're the 1% that doesn't, but like, you likely you post on Instagram, you post on Facebook, you post on X or whatever, like, TikTok, Snapchat, you use those social platforms consistently, right? You've built up a habit of using them. LinkedIn's a weird one because you don't really, it's hard to get that habit of using it. But it is a habit, right? Like once you build it up, then it becomes second nature. And it's the easiest way to stand out and put yourself on the radar. And we've signed clients that we've generated well over 6 figures from our content on LinkedIn that haven't even interacted with it, by the way. We placed some amazing candidates as well that sort of reached out to us through our posts, like lurkers, people that don't interact or like you have no idea the sort of people like it puts you in front of.
Mm.
And for the sake of you thinking, oh, is this going to be embarrassing? And then in the same day, you're posting on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, whatever. Um, why wouldn't you? So
Mm.
I think that question is a bit of a cop out, like because you can
Yeah.
do all of those other things, but you're going to be beaten by the person that is posting 2 to 3 times a week on LinkedIn. And it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be like war and peace. And I'm sure you've got something to say like about the state of the world or the industries you work in, right? So um, content I think is easy to come by once you get in the habit of doing it.
Yeah. And actually, if you are someone that really struggles on the personal branding front and what do I post and I don't know what to do, we did a webinar recently. So if you would like the link to that webinar, you can have that. I'll share that with you afterwards. And we also offer personal branding services. So if you do need extra support after you've watched our webinar, that is something that we can help you with. Okay, let's move on to the next question, as time's clocking on quickly. So, what should candidates know about how recruiters search for talent?
Again, I'm going to be a little bit sort of contrarian here, and I think just to be very honest, right? Like I mentioned, if you saw, and this isn't me sort of like trying to vindicate myself for the flaws in the recruitment industry, because there are many, right? Like no response is a response in today's market, just given the volume that not just myself. I think if you're spending your time sort of chasing down recruiters, like I think that's wasted energy, just to be like very honest with you. I mean, I have some people reach out to me and it's like, I've been doing recruitment for close to 10 years. And some people spend their time sort of reaching out to me, and there's jobs that never in my sort of, or like MCG's like, existence have we had a job on that's similar to that. That time and energy would be so much better spent sort of chasing down, building a company client list, a company list of like your target companies, connecting with hiring managers there or decision makers there, not even for now, like for the future when something does come up, because we're not golden tickets, right? Like we usually operate at a super senior level in niches of niches. Um, and the best I can do is I can get you an interview. So the back end metrics are, if you include the people that apply to the roles we posted, we probably help like 0.1% of people that reach out to us. And I know that's true for other, like lots of friends in the recruitment industry. Um, there's a big misconception about the way we work and what we do. We can be helpful. We try to be like we post our live jobs, we do posts, we've got our newsletters, we do these webinars, but helping people directly is like some people like I wouldn't know where to start, right? So put that time and energy, really focus it onto like, going directly to companies in your space, like connecting with decision makers there and having that network sort of ready for when the time does come that they might have something on. That's so much more valuable. Obviously, if a recruiter's posted a role that's like exactly what you're doing, then by all means, sort of chase them down. But the core of your time should be spent going directly for companies, as opposed to, recruiters individually.
Okay, so what I'm getting from what you said is like really research the companies that you want to go for and make it your mission, and be active
It's
in going direct to
my
them.
tactic, if like from knowing sort of LinkedIn quite well, because it's where I spend 90% of my day looking at a screen with LinkedIn on,
Mhm.
is, it's so easy as well with AI, right? Like to draw up 100 clients in X space in the UAE, I'm sorry, Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, in Doha, in Riyadh. Um, sort of filter that list, put it on one big spreadsheet, and then reach out to decision makers there. Try and get their email, message them on LinkedIn. And you can track it then as well. The sort of people that come back, people that haven't come back. Can I try someone else? What's the email format? But just taking it off LinkedIn, going direct, and putting less of an impetus on like recruiters. Because, like I said, best case, I've got a job on that aligns with your background. I can get you an interview. Can't get you a job. Like, there's no guarantee there from my side, right? An interview is usually 6, 7 stage processes, tons of people, like other recruitment agencies working here, direct candidates, referrals. So your time and energy is so much better spent chasing down these companies directly. And then you have a network as well. You're building out a network, you're making a name for yourself within that industry, which is important in the long term.
Nice. I love that strategy. I think that's a great strategy for everyone to take away from this today and kind of put into their job searches. Now, referrals and warm introductions used to be the
Yes.
best way to get into those top companies. Is that still the case?
Like if there's one thing people take away from this, I would like 100% yes in terms of like referrals and warm introductions, because I think what a lot of people say, and like what is called doesn't help its cause, but the hidden job market. Like I don't think people realize that 95% of jobs don't make it to LinkedIn, and I'll tell you why. It's because LinkedIn, again, another reason on the negative column, it's like ridiculously expensive. I think I saw a post and it's like a job ad for a month is, I know for a year it's like $800 to run it, like have a job ad slot, right? And if you're a small company and you're trying to fill 10 roles, are you really going to spend all that money on job adverts? Probably not. Like there are so many jobs that exist that don't ever make it to LinkedIn. And the ones people then obviously spend all that time fighting over the 5% that are visible on LinkedIn. So 100% go out there, meet as many people as you can, build that network. And I mentioned earlier those examples of people that sort of, got referred into jobs or found jobs themselves. It was through their network and through the sort of warm introductions they've made, or people that have sort of introduced them. And it just goes such a long way, right? Like even for myself, if someone reaches out to me that I know and trust and says, this is a great person, you should talk to them. like there's never been a time I haven't called them within the hour, right? Because I know that's valuable. Versus, and this is what another good point to make. LinkedIn, the boilerplate template that is like click here to populate this message. I mean, I get that 1,000 times a day. Like, there's nothing there that sort of compels me to that cold outreach that is someone clicking a button to pre-populate a message versus someone that's been introduced to me or referred to me. And I know that plays out on the side of a client as well.
Okay, that's interesting. So referrals are so important. Networking as well, so important. Okay, we're going to move into our
Yeah,
last section, which is the positioning gap and how to
yeah,
articulate value. Um,
yeah,
so a lot of people struggle with knowing what their value is. So if someone is unsure, where should they start?
yeah. I mean, that's so personal, or like to each person. I think one thing, I mean, we've actually spoken about it in the past, is like it sounds cheesy and it sounds like I think I was encouraged to do it when I did my tests in high school way back in the day. It was like STAR, that
Yep.
method where it's like situation, task, action, result. And it sounds stupid and it sounds super basic, but actually, probably the biggest reason we get CVs turned back, and we actually looked into this recently, the other when we were sort of analyzing our metrics, our side, is for a lack of like detail on the CV, or where clients sort of push back and say the CV looks good, but it doesn't tell me anything. So we're like really hot on this now, and that's something we identified, sorry, coming out of last year. So as an agency, when people send us CVs now, we're like, we really need to see like this, the value set that you're going to bring here, because I can't take that to my client because the first thing they're going to say is, well, what have they done?
Mm,
So if I was an individual, I'd sit down, sort of map out like what my selling points were, what sort of actions I've done or tasks I've undertaken, and a real emphasis on the tangible results that have come out on the other side, because that is what clients are looking for. And also to go back, if you're a hiring manager shifting through 100 CVs and you know you haven't got that on there, someone hasn't got that on there, someone hasn't got that on there, someone has got that on there, they're just going to call up the person that has got that on there instead of going back to those five people that haven't got it on there and saying, "Oh, can you redo your CV for me?" They don't have the time to do that. So it's a
yeah.
great way to make sure you're putting your foot forward, like your strongest foot forward as well.
Yeah, rather than just listing kind of responsibilities, you're actually showing what you've achieved.
Honestly, it's so important. It's like I said, when we sat down and looked at where are we falling short as a recruitment agency when we're sending out CVs, it was in that area. Like clients want to know straight away what's the tag, like what's going to be the ROI of me hiring this person? Is it because every job sort of has a like a graphic designer, I design images, like that every job's going to have that like so core familiarity between them. But what are the results? What are the takeaways? Why should they take a punt on you as opposed to the other person that also does graphic design? Or so it's such a good way to stand out.
Okay, so the STAR method is here to stay. I actually love this
Um,
method, by the way. Think it's great. Let's move on to our next question in this section, and that's about lots of candidates feeling like they might sound arrogant by,
yeah,
posting on LinkedIn or saying certain things on their CV. So how do you talk about your wins with confidence and not
yeah,
come across as arrogant?
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't get too caught up on it, right? I mean, you have to go really far out your way to come across as and 1% of the population do fall into that trap probably, but the rest of the people, like my from my experience, the majority of people that I speak to are too humble about what they've done rather than sort of like being these big egomaniacs. And to be honest, like you snuff them out straight away, right? Like, and there has to be a bit of a fine line between ego and confidence, because equally you don't want someone in a job interview that's sitting there slouched over and they're like, why should we hire you for the job? And they're like, oh, okay, I might be a good fit for this. Like, you do have to go in with a degree of confidence, right? Like, it's an interview is sort of like, or hiring someone is a bit of a transaction of trust. You need to trust that the company you're going into is the right one for you. And equally, they need to trust in you that you're going to get them the results that they need in whatever area it is. If you're not sort of coming across with a little bit of confidence or like, a bit of conviction, then they're not going to hire you, right? So I think swap the word confidence out. Don't like, you have to go really far out of your way to sort of be like a real egotistic arsehole during an interview. And I don't think that's people's natural inclination anyway. But swap it with conviction, right? Like you're applying for that job because you think you can get that job.
Yeah.
Explain why. Not overconfidence. That's facts. And I think that's a better way to sort of frame your mindset.
I loved the statement transition of trust. I'm gonna
Transaction of trust. Right?
transaction
That
of
on the
trust.
spot, that one.
That one was great. I'm gonna use that transaction
That's a
of
LinkedIn
trust.
post going out tomorrow.
Yeah, it should be. It was great. Okay, we are going to move into a little Q&A now before we wrap up, because we've had lots of questions come in and I want to make sure we answer some of those. So we've had a lot of questions about people that have taken a career break and wanting to
Yeah.
re-enter the market and what kind of roadblocks they might face with that. What advice would you give to someone that's looking to re-enter the market after maybe a couple of years career break?
Yeah. I think it probably ties quite closely in with that last question, that last section we did about positioning your value. Like you need to go into this sure and confident of what you can provide, um, and make sure you articulate that properly. Like I think you do have to position yourself a tiny bit different in the sense that, people will ask questions about why, but I've never found, unless it's been like a 10, 15 year gap or I've never found career gaps to be a real issue. Like if someone's good, they've got that experience, and actually they've probably usually got a huge selling point in the fact that they're immediately available. um, I wouldn't see that as like a huge roadblock into getting back into employment across most. I say that's like true for most of the industries we sort of work in.
Yeah. And on that note of those kind of career breaks, layoff
Yeah,
situations, how does someone explain what they've been doing for the last, say, 6 months to a year? If they've been looking for a job but struggling to find one, would you say just be completely
yeah.
honest, or what would your advice be there?
Always be honest. Like, I think in a world of, and we actually haven't spoken about this much, but of AI and, anyone can sort of pretend to be someone else online and complete inauthenticity on, I mean, how many times do we see LinkedIn posts and it uses those weird emojis, and you just know it's from someone that, would never put something up like that. Like authenticity is so powerful and it makes you stand out. And again, it's a bit of a differentiator. So I sort of leverage that and just be honest as possible because that's, if you're going to go in and lie about it, I mean, what's the point? You're going to get caught out at some point. But I think be true to who you are. And if a company wouldn't take you on because, oh, you've been out of work for 3 months looking, well, would you want to work for that company? Or would you want to work for the one that says, you know what, that's fair, um, and gives you that chance? You'd much rather work for the company that's going to take you on for being honest than the one that's going to take you on where if you'd have lied, you might have got it.
Yeah, authenticity. It's like a We hear that word all the time in the Middle East as well at the moment. It's all about authenticity since AI became a thing. Um,
Yeah,
we've had a few people asking about career changes as well. Some not
yeah,
relevant to kind of the industries that we work in, but some are
yeah,
and want to move into those industries in like really busy, saturated markets like Hong Kong or Singapore.
yeah.
Um, what advice would you give to someone that's trying to make a career move into a new industry?
When we say new industry, like we're talking about someone that's not got, like, never worked that sector before,
Exactly.
like complete 180.
Complete 180. They want to make a career move into this new sector. They've not worked in the sector before.
Like there's no sort of easy answer for me to give on that, right? Like we are in incredibly tough, super competitive markets globally where employers have a complete luxury of choice, and the odds of them sort of taking a risk on someone at a time where margins are very tight, um, it's just to not give you a sort of wishy-washy answer, it's unlikely at the moment, especially if on top of that you're looking to relocate.
Yeah.
Because I've mentioned like all the hurdles a company has to go through when relocating someone. Um, So to then factor in like, are they going to adapt to this industry? Super, super, super tough. Has it been done? Probably, yeah. But at the moment, I'd say if someone's like said to me, is this likely? If I was being honest, I'd say probably not. Like, and I know that's not the answer some people wanted to hear, but um, they're the facts, I think.
Yeah. Actually, a friend of mine is in a similar circumstance to that right now, and she wants to completely change her career, but
Yeah.
she wants to have the same salary that
So
she's
that's one point. That's a good point. Like, if you're willing to go entry or like level or sort of like really put yourself in there and maybe do some, I don't know if your situation allows some like interns or um, maybe there's a window of opportunity. But just imagine, like hypothetically, you're the employer. You've got a role to fill. You need it filled. You need someone solid, dependable, and you've got 50 people who can walk in today. Like this is speaking probably more for Dubai who have done the job before at similar agencies, um, it's very unlikely they're going to take a punt on someone who's never worked in that space, never worked in the region, never done the job before, and they would have to train up from scratch. And then,
yeah,
like you said, they're asking for the same salary than
yeah.
they've previously been at. I mean, like, come on, I think anyone that sort of works in a business sort of knows, this, unfortunately, that that's going to be quite unlikely.
Exactly. And you kind of have to start from the bottom again to gain
Yeah,
experience in that industry. And people
yeah.
don't expect that because, they're like, well, I've got transferable skills and, that's great, but you still need that industry experience, right?
Also where we're seeing a transition, which I mentioned in the very first question, towards like no one is sort of like I think struggling to think anyway. Clients we work with, they're looking for apart from like some of the I don't know maybe governments that are sort of building out, but like no one's looking for like a huge like big people. Like what are the key themes we've been seeing? Offshoring, and AI sort of picking up people's jobs and responsibilities that might have fallen to people before. So there's a real tend towards going lean but efficient and strong personnel in each of those positions. So do I think they're the market conditions for that shift to happen right now? Probably not, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, we are going to have to wrap up there because we've gone a couple of minutes over. But I just want to say thank you to everyone in the audience who joined us today. And I will be sharing a recording afterwards. So look out for that. And we'd love to hear your feedback or any topics that you'd love to see us cover in the future. I'd also love to thank Charlie for joining us today, for sharing his advice and taking the time out of his day to share that with you guys. And Charlie, if you could just let us know the best way to get in touch with you moving forward.
Yeah, drop me a message on LinkedIn or connect. Like I said, bit of a congested space, but I do try once a month to usually shift through the inbox to try and get back to as many people as I can. And thank you, Laura. You are a great host as always.
No problem. Another way to get Charlie's attention is to comment on his posts. If you're consistently commenting, he's probably going to notice you. So that's another great way to get him to engage with you because he is a very busy man with many, many, many messages. So again, thank you everyone, and that is the end of our webinar today. So bye bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye. See you all later.